CBS Chief Investigative Correspondent Armen Keteyian is in New York, and CBS News national security analyst Juan Zarate is in our LA bureau. Armen, I want to start with you. What's the latest? What can you tell us?
Well, John, the latest is the investigation is moving forward on several different fronts. The investigators are digging into Abdul Muttalib's life. They're trying to determine right now whether he was a lone wolf acting on his own or whether he was connected to another group or organization. Yesterday, Scotland Yard seized his computer in London. They're looking through emails, any kind of documents. They're searching for videos or diaries or writings or blogs that would offer some insight into his motivation, into his mindset, and again, whether he was connected to any other group or organization.
Juan, James Clyburn, Democratic Congressman James Clyburn, said that he thought this was a narrow incident. Can they know that this fast, and does that strike you as the case?
Well, I think it's narrow in one context, in terms of the security concerns with respect to vetting of individuals, the listing, and security procedures getting on planes. But I think there's a broader issue here, which is if, in fact, this individual got training from al-Qaeda individuals in Yemen to launch an attack, this could be a game changer, because it will be the first time since 9/11 that you've had a U.S.-based plot driven out of somewhere other than the Pakistan-Afghan theater. And so I think that could change the context of how we view the terrorist threats, how the administration has to deal with the potential safe haven in Yemen, and also how we view other safe havens in Somalia and North Africa. And so I would caution against too early a judgment as to the scope and dimensions of this threat.
Well, I want to stay on Yemen there for just a second. Talking to a senior administration official today, they said, if you notice, Yemen creeps into the president's speeches about terrorism and has over the last several months. Thinking outside of the context of this event, is Yemen sort of like Afghanistan was in, say, 1990? I mean, how should people think about that country?
Well, you've got a problematic theater in Yemen. You've got an unstable government. You've got three different security situations, a Shia rebellion in the north, secessionists in the south, and then an increasing al-Qaeda presence. And you have greater ties to plots toward the U.S. in Yemen. Recall the recruitment center attack in Little Rock, where the individual had traveled to Yemen. Recall the Fort Hood case with Anwar al-Awlaki, the American cleric in Yemen, providing some degree of communications with Hassan, the perpetrator of that attack. And now you have this individual having perhaps received training and the materials in Yemen and then traveling toward the U.S. And so this presents a real problem, and it suggests a need for a more aggressive approach and explains why there have been more aggressive attacks by the Yemeni government against al-Qaeda over the last 2 weeks.
Armen, I want to ask you now about PETN, which was the substance that Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, used in 2001. He had it in his shoe. This was also used in this bomb effort. How easy is this to get, just to start?
Well, John, just to take a quick step backwards, that's what investigators are looking at right now. How much of the PETN was in the suspect's underwear, stashed in that little clear plastic baggie. They're also looking at the chemical compound that was allegedly injected into that substance to see how much and what that concoction really was. But PETN is a fairly easy substance to obtain. It's used in blasting caps, it's used in detonation cords, it's used in small arms ammunition. It is readily available, and as Juan said and you suggested, it was used by Richard Reed 8 years ago, the so-called shoe bomber. It was also part of the Semtex that brought down Pan Am 103 back in 1988. So it is a concern, it's available, and it adds to this whole security question because it isn't detectable, evidently, going through the metal detectors at airports.
What about the other kinds of detection efforts? We've talked today about pat-downs. What about some of these other detection efforts? Would they have been able to catch this?
Doesn't appear to be at this point in time. Certainly a detection, if you're going to pat down every individual passenger that goes through an airport, what kind of nightmare that would pose for the nation's travel could only be imagined. But the concern that we heard this morning from some of the people that we were talking to is the history of PETN as an explosive device on airplanes getting through metal detectors is becoming even increasingly a concern to U.S. people that we talk to in the U.S. government today.
Juan, last question to you, which is on this watch list. You've been on the inside in the government. How possible is it to fix this huge list, to make it more efficient? The president's called for a review. Tell us what that will look like and how hard that will be to do.
Well, it's a difficult balance because you have multiple lists that are used for different reasons across the government. The initial database in which this individual's name appeared is the general database. It's got over 500,000 names. The no-fly list, the selectee list, those are the lists that are used to hold people off planes or to have secondary searches, is a much narrower list of people, in part for efficiency's sake. And people need to recall that the pressure over the last couple of years, especially from Congress, has been to reduce the numbers on that list. And so now you've got a pendular swing the other way, with people probably suggesting that the list for pat-downs and for no-fly should be larger. It's a difficult balance.
Juan, we got to go. Thanks very much, gentlemen.